This occurred 8 years ago, when I was a sophomore in high school. Maya Bex Bells and I were out on a bike ride, seeking for interesting areas to explore in a run-down neighborhood, when we came across a rather eerie cave. We performed some minor exploring that day, but quickly realized that more exploration would necessitate more equipment, flashlights, respirators, etc. About a week later, 5 of us returned with the necessary equipment and a camera to investigate what we could uncover in the mine. We noticed that there was just one mining shaft that dipped downward and further into the soil, so we followed that main route. It was large enough for a car to drive along and was quite well sloped, so walking was simple. There were various rooms, aged machinery, and rusted equipment off this main shaft, but we largely avoided it at first. We were attempting to avoid becoming lost or confused. Along the way, the walls were covered in classic band graffiti, including X was here, swastikas, initials and dates, phallic drawings, and more. However, as we moved deeper, the graffiti began to thin out. At this point, the light from the entrance had faded, and we were depending exclusively on flashlights. The air was so stagnant and murky with particulates that the light from our weak flashlights could only travel about 20 feet before being completely hidden by the dust. The glow sticks we had brought to indicate our path and keep us from getting lost were also mostly ineffective because they vanished in the haze barely a few steps after being dropped. At this moment, we began bickering among ourselves. Several members of the group were hesitant to venture any further due to the poor air quality and the lack of a suitable way to avoid getting lost. We were about a quarter mile into the ground by now. The rest of us managed to overcome their concern by promising them that the way was simple and uncomplicated, so we'd have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our cool heads, sense of direction, and torch battery life to get out. Despite the argument to continue, it was becoming increasingly creepy for everyone. We traveled in quiet for a while, just hearing our own footsteps and the steady trickle of water from somewhere deep in the cave. I believe we were all afraid at this point, but were unable to confess it to one another. Then we came across something that made all of us stop dead. A tunnel, an offshoot, was dug into the side of the deep stone shaft down which we were slowly descending. It was narrow. You had to crouch to pass through it, and it was also a few feet above the ground, necessitating a struggle to get there. But that wasn't the reason we stopped. It was graffiti. We hadn't seen any in about 10 minutes and figured the artist never went this deep. But someone else had, and their message was foreboding. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all of which had something to do with death and destruction. Suffering, misery, plague, sickness, and hell were all written across the tunnel. It was quite disturbing. Who else would travel this far merely to leave a horrible message in a secret tunnel that diverted off the main path? But there was no going back. We needed to see where the tunnel led. Despite our fears, we were overcome by an immense curiosity. So we crawled one by one through the tunnel to the other side. What we discovered was a bizarre flooded chamber. Several big stones surrounded the pool of water, each covered in dozens of burnt-out tea candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in that location. The walls had a few terrifying monster faces badly graffitied on them, and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was surrounded by a spray-painted, blood-stained mouth. What was this place? Some type of ceremonial location for local Satanists? An elaborate hoax staged by a group of children? We couldn't discover much evidence to figure it out, and we were running out of adrenaline to continue exploring. We all crawled out of that strange hellhole and back into the main shaft, where we swiftly returned to the exit. We were overcome with relief when we finally saw that sliver of natural light from the outside world. We never figured out what that secret cavern was for, and I guess I'm fine to leave it that way. No, we didn't hear any creatures in the tunnel or find any gory Satan worshippers, but merely finding that room buried deep in an ancient, forgotten mine frightened us all for a long time. We visited an abandoned hospital. There was a massive square staircase spiraling up to the roof outside the building, with a locked steel door at the bottom, so the only option was to climb up from the outside to the first landing. My body helps me up. I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife on the landing. I call down, "We're definitely not alone here, dude." "No, but it's cool," says a voice behind me, startling the crap out of me and making me jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there, descending the stairs from above. Hands up, palms out. "I didn't mean to scare you." He takes a seat on the staircase, so I cautiously step on the steak knife handle, lean over the side, and help my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and have a beer, so we offered one to the homeless man, who graciously accepted it, and we shot them on the landing for a bit. We're discussing the city, cops, travel, and life in general. He's a drifter who has been in town for about a week, but he's a decent person. Things are going well until he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I detest it when I meet individuals who turn out to be aliens, and you never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me for a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never do. Sometimes I feel like I should just kill everyone to be secure. He's not joking, and there's an awkward moment as my friend and I realize he's crazy. "Yeah man," I respond. "We are human. We just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're going to move on now. We don't want any difficulty." He just stares in quiet, so we leave him with the remaining beer. We gently hop back up the railing, descend, and hastily walk away, continually looking back over our shoulders. He's just standing there, calm and silent, watching us depart. 5 years later, that location remains abandoned, and we've never returned. I don't believe in the supernatural, yet individuals may be deceiving and deadly in ways you never anticipate. This will be brief, but the recollection came to me a few days ago, and I thought it was worth sharing. I live in North Wales. For anyone who has had the pleasure of visiting, it is a very wonderful place to live. Nevertheless, for an adolescent male, there are absolutely not enough activities. As a result, my buddies and I would frequently find ourselves mindlessly wandering parts of the countryside and seashore. Despite its limited population in relation to the nearest cities, there is a dual highway that runs down the coast from Wales to England. Also, train tracks run beside this road for the majority of its length, occasionally passing overhead via a short cement bridge. Anyway, roughly 4 of us decided one night a few years back to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges after one of the group noticed a manhole cover nearby that we assumed was the entrance. Upon closer study, we realized that many tools would be required to obtain admission. We returned with the appropriate equipment and began unbolting the cover. This had to be done silently because the train track was right behind us, not close enough to pose a threat, but close enough to provoke panic in any train driver. And panic usually implies police. We quickly removed the heavy steel disc and began descending the ladder into the structure. We decided to move on to the other side after we had all safely reached the bottom. At this point, we are completely limited to the tiny passageway leading into the main hall. If you are perplexed as to what this bridge is intended to be, you should be, because it was quite unusual. I mean, if we hadn't located the manhole, I would have had no idea there was an inside. As we squeeze and crouch, rubbing our bellies against the other side of the building, we develop a developing sense of claustrophobia. The journey from end to end seems surprisingly lengthy, but around the halfway point, you can see down through thin openings onto the motorway beneath. This was actually pretty cool, and it helped keep us calm in an unusual way. Aside from the moderate pain and imprisonment, we were still simply a group of guys on an adventure, and things were about to alter radically. Just a few meters past midway, one of us claimed to see an object in the distance at the far end. We reluctantly agreed to investigate. This was a bad decision. I got to the finish first, and let me tell you, I've never felt such dread before or since. In front of me, there was a single fold-away chair facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or magazine depicting a fully naked woman in an amorous posture. The reason I don't just call it porn is that something was odd about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it felt more ominous than sensual, if that makes sense. More frighteningly, the eyes of the woman on display had been carefully clipped from the sheet rather than ripped out. The spectacle in front of us rendered us speechless, and we all felt an overwhelming sensation of panic. That's when we discovered the condom. The awful, gut-wrenching, blood-soaked condom. Needless to say, we rushed out of there as quickly as possible, bashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder. Of course, we were all hoping to God that the manhole cover hadn't been resealed, as you couldn't tell until you got to the ladder. Thankfully, the exit was clear, so we sprinted as far as our legs could carry us. I'm sure some of you reading this will be disappointed by the ending, but we were fortunate not to encounter the twisted individual who sits in that chair. But I must emphasize how far out of the ordinary this was considering where I reside. I mentioned the population earlier on purpose. There are easily enough people here to avoid the regions of insane country folk, but not nearly enough to allow someone to obviously lose control of society without anyone noticing. For example, there was literally only one homeless man in the region who everyone knew and liked, which led to a large crowd at his funeral when he died. Sometimes I wonder, though not recently because I had almost forgotten about that night, about the individual who descends down that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and do God knows what, ending up with a condom full of blood. You couldn't imagine a more strange setting. I've recently realized that what we discovered that night has never been shared with anyone else. As a naive adolescent, it was something you wanted to forget. But, in retrospect, we probably should have informed the police or someone about what was going on down there, because that was not the behavior of a healthy person. So there you have it. I apologize for the length. It was my first Let's Not Meet article, and I got a little carried away. I attempted to bring the reading experience as close to his reality as I could. Now that I am a few years older, I aim to be a little braver. I'm thinking of heading down there again, this time with someone, to see what's up. This could happen in the next few days, and I will definitely provide an update because I currently have no employment and plenty of free time.